Hello, City Light Omaha young adults. It's Tyler coming at you with another video, and this one is going to be again geared to more of the discussion on race, ethnicity, those issues that are kind of bubbling up to the surface with all that's been going on. For this particular video, I had a friend who asked a few questions that are very poignant on, especially about what is race, what is ethnicity, and I'd love to look at those questions from a biblical point of view. And so here they are. First one is race a biblical or a social construct? Next one is, if we are all descendants from the same two people, how can we be of a different race? And what is the difference between race and ethnicity? Now, y'all know how I like to do all of my videos. They all come out really in 3 points, and I'll just walk through those real quickly, and then we will hop right in. Those 3 points are, first one is, why do we have racial distinctions? And the way I'd like to word that is different physical features, rather than saying race distinctions. The next one is, what does the Bible actually teach about this issue? And lastly, what do we do with this information? And so just to hop in on that first point, why do we have different physical features? Like skin color, eye shape, nose shape, all those different things. Why do we have that? And the way I like to look at it is, God gave us a variety of things. So when you look at animals, go to the zoo, look at all of God's beautiful creatures that he created. And that's not even half of them. You look outside, there's different flowers, there's different trees, you hear all the different sounds of the birds. We have all this great food here, different fruits, different vegetables, even if animals, whatever it is, there's a variety of food to eat. And the same thing happens when it comes down to humanity. I'm glad that there are people who are lighter than me and people who are darker than me. I love that there are people who have different shaped eyes than me, who have different shaped ears, different cultures. It's beautiful. But whenever you get the entrance of sin, all sin does is take a beautiful thing that God created and pervert it. You look at sex, a beautiful gift that God gave to humanity. What do we do with it? We tear it to pieces and use it in a not God-honoring way. You look at truth versus lying. All sin is a perversion of a beautiful gift that God has given us, and we pervert it. That's what sin is. And that's the same thing that happens with the racial distinctions that we see now. And I don't want to give an entire history lesson on where we get those distinctions from, but primarily we do get that from the transatlantic slave trade and how those slave traders made those distinctions based on purely color. And then that promoted thought, but that's just for our side of the pond. Different things happen in different places, but that's kind of where we get ours from. I could do another video on that, but I don't want to go into a whole discussion for this particular video. So still looking in the point of why we have different physical features and why certain groups gather together in certain ways, I think we can go back and look at Genesis chapter 11 of what we call the Tower of Babel. But to give you a quick nerdy point, it's really pronounced Babel. Babel. I just want to throw that in there as a free nugget for the day. But at the Tower of Babel, whatever you want to call it, all of the nations, all of the people were gathered together at this time in that place. They all had the same language and one vocabulary. However, they wanted to build a temple led by Nimrod that was going to reach all the way up to the heavens, quote unquote. And God, what does he do? He confuses the languages. He confused all their languages so they could no longer communicate with one another. It was very confusing. They couldn't get any more work done. And then people started to disperse. Now, I can't layer on the text what this is me having just trying to make sense of that, and kind of what that might have led to is people who had their language confused in a more similar way. And maybe they look more alike, because remember, sin is in the world at this time. So maybe those people, as they migrate together. So people who look a little more similar, they have more of a similar language now, they might have dispersed in another direction. I can't say that dogmatically, but that is, I would argue, a likely explanation for why we see groupings in that way. So to move to the second point, what does the Bible actually teach about ethnicity and race? That's actually another great question, because in biblical times, the primary divider of people was not what we would think of as race. It was primarily ethnicity. Because even the word that we see translated as nations, goy, was primarily used to look at not how a person looked on the outside. Yes, there were physical distinctions that some words point to, whether they were dark skinned or whatever that was. But the primary divider of people in this day and time was ethnicity. And I think that is a pretty easy segue into what is ethnicity versus race. And I keep using my roommate who's actually in there now, Justin, as a prime example of this. Is racially, he is Korean. When you see him walking down the street, you could definitely tell that he is an Asian man. However, ethnically, he was adopted. He grew up in Lincoln, so he is ethnically American. He would be lost just as much as I would be if we were to be dropped off in Korea. Would he get along a little easier because he looks like the people over there? Yes, he would. I'd have a harder time. But ethnically, he is American. He was born and raised. He was brought up here. He was raised here, born in Korea. So we would look at that as racially Korean, however, ethnically American. And even to give a personal example for me is in America, people would look at me and they would most likely call me an African American. Now, I don't mind that. I don't go into a fit about that. But I'll tell you, I don't know anything about Africa. If you were to drop me off over there right now, I would be just as lost as anybody else. I don't know the first thing about Africa. Yes, racially, my ancestors are from Africa. But I am American ethnically. I grew up here. This is all that I know. And that's a distinction that I'd like to really see. And I hope that's helpful to see the difference in race and ethnicity. Ethnicity speaks more to culture, how you worship, how you eat, the things you eat, all those kind of things. But your race is primarily the physical features that you have. And like I said before, biblically, the distinctions were not, I can't mess with this tribe because their skin is darker than mine. It was, I can't mess with this tribe because they eat pork. They eat something that I don't eat. They worship in a way that I don't. That's where the distinctions got drawn. It was really primarily an ethnic thing rather than a physical description or race thing. And the last point we have here is, what do we do with that? So taking it from the perspective of original creation, before sin, God gives a diverse array of everything else, including human beings, or rather gives Adam and Eve the potential to have a diverse array of human beings. And after sin enters the world, because of the evil that is in us, we make distinctions and we group together with people who look more like us, who talk more like us. We begin to make these physical feature divides and look down on other people. That's where you get all the evil that comes out of from racism and prejudice, is because of sin. That is not God's intention. So then, looking from a biblical perspective, what do we do with this information? So I'd say one thing that we can do is appreciate the diversity. Appreciate that God does not just give us one color, that he doesn't give us one height. He doesn't give us one nose shape, one ear shape, one eye shape. He has given a plethora of different people. A plethora of different people who are all one race, the human race, God's image bearers. Doesn't matter if the person doesn't think like you. Doesn't matter if they don't look like you, talk like you, have your story. They are an image bearer of God, and they have innate value because of that. And that leads me into the next part, where I say pursue relationships with people that don't look like you, that don't think like you do, don't have your story. Because that can help you, and it helps me to have a better appreciation for the diversity that God has given us. It is good and it is God honoring. Can it be uncomfortable to speak to someone who doesn't think like you do? Yes. Can it be uncomfortable to speak to someone who doesn't have your background? Yes, it can. But what I'd say, as believers, people who have been redeemed by God, we then have the opportunity to repair relationships that go this way with other people. And then just to kind of round that up, I wanted us to take a look at Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 and 10, that says this. After this I looked, and there was a vast multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language, which no one could number, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. And listen to this, y'all. And they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who is seated on the throne, and to the Lamb." People of every tribe, every nation, every tongue gathered together to worship the one true God. It is a beautiful picture of where we will be someday. But just because that is going to be what it is someday in the kingdom of God does not mean that God has left us to not do anything at our kingdom posts right now. He has left us here to bring the kingdom to earth the best way we can through the relationship, one, that we have with God through the blood of Jesus, and then also spreading out his gospel to the rest of the nations. So y'all, I hope that was helpful. I hope it was a little bit shorter, and I hope that was just a clear, concise video that is helpful. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later.